Coming up in the latest episode of Netball Unlocked, we wrap up a busy week of news and pay tribute to a netball icon. We hear from one of the stars of the season so far as Cassie Howard chats to us after Rhinos' trip to London, and we'll review round 12 and analyse the fact that now there is just one place up for grabs as the season heads in to the final straight. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Netball Unlocked. Chloe here for the duration. Hello, Chloe.
I'm finally back.
Only just.
A member of the cast. Feels crazy, doesn't it?
It was, yeah. Chloe obviously jetted back, and we reflected on the England squad, which sort of feels like a lifetime ago now because of just how much netball news there appears to have been. But firstly, how was your netball weekend?
Yeah, I mean, wasn't it just our luck that as soon as we put the podcast out, there was a news about Joe Tripp that we almost hesitated, didn't we? We were like, oh, shall we? But no, we decided to hold and hear from Joe, I suppose, which we did actually from the game as to like why she, was stepping back or stepping away. But that was big. But it wasn't the only thing. We then had Casey Kapua just reappear and all sorts. So yeah, like it was, as you say, like it's hard to believe that an England squad came out last week.
And then this morning, like Geva Mentor, like icon of icons, like one of the greatest netballers to play the game, not just English players, but across the board. An astonishing netball career, and we'll get into all these little news separate, but I think is worth headline billing for Geva. An incredible athlete, an incredible ambassador, and I think I've said before that some of our netball stars like really don't get the credit they deserve for their skills, first of all, and in Geva's case, add longevity to that because she was 16, 17 when she played in her first Commonwealth Games, and here she is sort of still more than holding her own in the Netball Super League. So yeah, look, a brilliant career, and yeah, that was Tuesday. So it's like news. Are we going to have time for game reviews, Chloe?
It's going to be a long one, everyone.
Strap in, yeah, strap in. Late night recording, and we might be going past midnight again. But I think it's probably worth reflecting first of all on sort of the major Super League news, and a bit of a tumultuous few days for Birmingham Panthers, because I think we suspected Sigi Burger would be out for the rest of the season. That's been confirmed, and obviously on top of that now, we got confirmation that Joe Tripp will be leaving at the end of the season. Obviously a brand new franchise in the first instance, sort of a little bit born out of Seven Stars. I think it's fairly obvious to say that. But this kind of maybe, and we got news, was it a couple of rounds into the season, about some significant investment from the guys involved at Birmingham City Football Club, and we know that they are very ambitious. Feels like there might be a bit of a reset coming for Birmingham this summer after everything that's kind of gone on.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't get too much information as to why Jo was leaving, whether it was because there was an opportunity for her or for other reasons. But, I think like as you said, when you have that kind of a significant investment comes in, I think a shake-up kind of does necessarily follow. I just don't think maybe that was the thing that people were expecting. Certainly it was received as a bit of a shock from the outside, at least. But yeah, like when you look back now already at Panthers season, it's been quite, I think tumultuous is certainly one word. With a player forced into early retirement, you've had Sigi Burger now out. Gabby Sinclair took several weeks to start. They only had three Gabbies on court at once. So one time before that all ended in tears. So I just think that. Yeah, it's been a bit of a tough start, and we sort of said, like, I think a lot of this renewed league revamp does kind of sit a bit on these new teams trying to find an audience, and it has been a bit tricky for Birmingham Panthers, and they've been a tough team. Like, I think we'll say that, and we'll show that with what comes, but just really unfortunate maybe with the start that they've had, and now this.
Yeah, and they kind of felt like not playing catch up. That's unfair but you can't help when injuries happen. But the latest injury to Sigi, as we've mentioned, does open up like a question that I know a lot of people on social media have been debating, and I know we kind of discussed it at the start of the year. But when you bring in a permanent replacement, and Birmingham are far from the only team to do this. They've gone outside of their own pathway, their own next gen, to kind of replace Sigi. And I suppose in like for like terms, and Antonia Mitchell is big, tall, strong, holding shooter, so sort of fits the bill in that regard. But she's come across from Lightning, and she's played for Lightning this year as they dealt with Sammy Wallace's return. Not something I'm particularly comfortable with, I have to say, like kind of plucking someone from someone else's team. I'm pretty certain it's going to be up for debate, and I think almost one or two people have mentioned it to us before. It might be in amongst that conversation at the end of the season, but obviously a great opportunity for Antonia Mitchell down the stretch to get some Super League minutes under her belt. But where do you sit on that, Chloe? Sigi being replaced by someone from another team, basically?
Yeah, I think particularly because we're towards the back end of the season, it feels almost weirder because obviously Antonia has literally spent most of her time, and Next Gen started before Super League started, so they've been going at it a while. But I think for me, it raises a big question about what exactly Next Gen actually is and what its purpose is, and if I'm being kind, we are in a 2.0 and things are being figured out, and we were sort of told as much. But I think, is this a reserves league or is this genuinely a next gen league? Do we need to lift that under 23 cap and actually have a team and teams of players properly able to come in and replace the ones that your Super League teams, because like 10 is just a very small number. SSN has that 11th player. They've learned that lesson. We decided not to take that lesson from SSN, and I would imagine certain teams, unsurprisingly, will be lobbying the league going forwards about a 10-player policy. But if you're not going to change that, then I do think Next Gen needs to be looked at properly and really, what is it for? What is its purpose? Because, actually, was it Sam? I can't remember. We've had a lot of guests and great guests at that. But, talking about being really strategic with your Next Gen team, because you have to kind of think about replacements. But you might be doing all of that strategy work for someone to just come in and go, oh, sorry, I'm going to really need that player. And like India Massa, for example, has slotted right in at Thunder, but she was taken from another team. So and maybe that's where recruitment, players that okay, well, I've just seen that this league's kind of actually reserve temporary and permanent replacement players have been used quite a lot. Like, it might mean that they want to angle themselves towards a certain club's next gen team to be in with a chance to be a replacement. But yeah, I think it is odd. It's really odd, isn't it? Like, in a sporting context, like, to have
I thought it
that.
was odd. I thought it was odd when I found out about it at the start of the season that like you could. I think I remember saying, "What, you can take someone from another team squad?" And there's a part of me that thinks obviously this all came up and started so quickly last year, like everyone has told us that. And maybe there's an element of being able to sort of give players who found out they didn't have a job or wouldn't have a job and had to make very quick life decisions, to just kind of allow them to still be in close to home or close to university or wherever it might be, but then allow the wider league to just sort of, okay, let's get used to this and we'll take our players as and when we need them. But I think if you combine what we found out this season, which is that there's definitely a strain on squads. Some teams have been a bit luckier than others, but there's definitely a strain on squads. I think Next Gen, and I don't know how much of it you've been able to see, Chloe. I've seen a reasonable amount. I've seen maybe 4 or 5 games over the course of the season. It's a really good idea, but the purpose of it, I think, needs to be nailed down. And almost to the point of, if we have 10-player squads and then you have like a 12-player Next Gen squad, but that's the only squad that you can beef up your 10 from. Like, even if you've got players who, and we don't know the ins and the outs here, but if you've got players who in football terms are, or in other sports terms, who are in the red, but like you have to kind of almost have them on the bench sometimes because they're part of your squad. Whereas if you've got a tried and trusted member of your Next Gen sort of group that you can just bring in because they know the system, they trust the way you play, it feels like if we're going to have a professional setup, that is something that would aid that setup, because you're bringing through your talented young players. You might recruit an experienced head at the front end of the court, an experienced head at the back end, an experienced head in the middle, and have those players almost as your kind of cab number sort of 11, 12 and 13 to beef up your squad. I appreciate I'm throwing a lot out there here, but I feel like because of what we found out with injuries and because of what Next Gen maybe should be and isn't quite being, there's just such a massive body of work to pull that closer together. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I think also, I don't, when you say you've been watching it, I presume you've been watching it in person when you've been at
Yeah,
games.
I've caught pulse, like when I've been down to watch a few. I think I watched them against Forest, against Rhinos, not Lightning, a couple of other teams. I've watched 4 or 5 games this season.
Yeah, because I think I haven't tried to watch the stream. I didn't pay for it, I will confess. And I think some folks online have, and they've been really disappointed by it. And I think that's the other thing. It's like, is this a competition teams can genuinely try and compete for and win if they are being constantly, players being plucked out of? Because I think, Karen Gregg will be pulling her players, because, she has, where she's been able to pull Thunder players up, but it then leaves the next gen team without any players. So is it a competition you're genuinely trying to win? What are the narratives behind it? Like, who's winning what, where? Like, outside of club socials, like, it's quite barren as a space. And like, obviously netball was fighting for attention anyway, and you and I are trying to give what we can to the Super League, but we haven't got the energy or the time or the resources to do next gen. But yeah, I just think its identity, its purpose, like, there's a lot of things that still very much need to be worked on. And as I said, I'm sure clubs will be lobbying the league to like fit this league for the purpose it needs to actually serve, which is like, okay, if we have to stick with 10, we need to look at this properly and maybe lift the under 23 aspect out of it off, and let people play, and not let this plucking across happen. I don't know, like, I'm not sure, like, actually the taking from another team, other than it just being weird, I don't really know if there is another issue with it. Like, I guess it's Super League minutes regardless, and that's probably what this next gen. It was Lindsay Keeble. She was saying this as well. This is what this next gen player is being told in their ear all the time. Like, be ready, be ready, be
Yeah.
ready. But I do just think it's odd for identity purposes and for like building clubs to just have this like cross.
Yeah, I feel like, why would you invest your time in a player who might have come through your pathway and who you're now readying to get ready for kind of maybe the next step, not next year, but maybe the year after, in terms of a Super League contract, and then like halfway through the season, because one of your rivals knows what you're up to maybe, and knows that you've got a really talented player coming through, have an injury of their own, and then just pluck that player out of your system, and then you lose them for like what might be 6, 7, 8 weeks of a season. It just doesn't feel professional in a professional era. Interesting story brewing though in Next Gen, by the way. Do you know what the league table looks like?
I don't see. No, I don't.
No. So Lightning are top of the table, second flying Team Bath, which is kind of interesting to me because obviously they don't have a Super League team. They get good crowds down there who go and watch it because it is their only exposure to sort of some top level netball. I know Lily Jones has obviously kind of parachuted into Thunder a couple of weeks ago as their shooter crisis deepened. But yeah, interesting story brewing. It would be quite funny in a funny way if the first winners of the Next Gen League were a team who don't have a Super League team.
Wouldn't that be poetic?
It would be quite poetic, wouldn't it? It would be quite poetic. But incredible credit to Team Bath, who have Phoebe Maslin, who's in the England Future squad there as part of that. I'm quite surprised maybe someone hasn't maybe tried to pluck her out when it comes to injury and things as well. So.
No, did she not appear for Panthers? I think maybe.
She did. You are right. Yeah, she did. I should have had my starting sevens Excel sheet up on my other screen rather than the next
You do all
table.
that work, Paul, not for this moment.
Not to have it open. Yeah, typical.
But then I think that sort of sorry to points to you that points out just how much Panthers, to our point earlier, like have had to pull in and out. We talk a lot about Thunder, and there's Mavericks as well, but Panthers has just been really unstable as well.
Geva Mentor retiring is clearly the really big news of the week, this week at least. I know you've spoken to her. I've spoken to her. Chloe, both had been privileged to carry out an interview. But I think transcending all of that, an incredible career, an incredible player, and a brilliant, brilliant ambassador, as we kind of alluded to.
I think for me, Geva is one of those players that women's sport, when you talk about, paying homage to the people that came before you, there is this generation of English players really do owe a lot to Geva, and the longevity, but also the kind of career that she was able to have in Australia, to show that that was a route for players
Yeah,
to tangibly. Because I don't know if you've read her book Leap. I
I
have.
have.
Well,
Yeah,
there we go. Yeah, so she talks about that, and the risk that she took, and how upsetting that was at the time, and the legend she became over there. I really remember during the 2019 World Cup, Tracy Neville was mixing up her defence end, because England were playing a team where they could afford to do that, and then an Aussie journalist turns to me and go, and watching Geva Mentor come off the bench, and she goes, "Oh, Tracy's parking the Lamborghini," and you're just like, "Of course," because that's what she was for England for so long. She was that star, that 6'5" hope that we had against Janelle, when it would invariably come down to an England Jamaica bronze medal match, and I think she's a great personality. She's been incredibly open in her interviews. Like Jenny Sinclair, who we had on as a guest, did an amazing piece with Geva about fertility, and
yeah, I was going to mention that. Yeah,
yeah, and I think that's she's wicked, really, and people won't be able to have a career as long as Geva's, or Jade, and the same with Jade Clark. Like, that just won't happen as sport professionalizes, in the manner in which it is. But she definitely went and showed a bunch of people, this is what you could do, this is what can be done, and to be 40 and to walk away from the game having achieved what she's done, and to be respected in multiple countries, and known as a brand. Like, I think over here as well, like, that is the netball name for people, like her, and then Helen Housby maybe comes shortly after that. So yeah, it's I feared this day might be coming, like, I think we can all say that, but it's great to also see that she's kind of got her fingers in a bunch of pies as well. Like the Netball France gig, I think could be cool to see what comes out of there. But yeah, no, a legend for sure.
yeah. And I think I remember talking to you at the Netball World Cup, Chloe, and we were like, what are England going to do when all these players retire? And it feels fairly remarkable that Geva had got another 6 years out of her career, both domestically, not quite so long internationally. And I think it speaks to just how great those players are. And I think your point about kind of going overseas and blazing a trail, which is such a cliche, but in netball's case, for British netballers, I think it's so true. Because even like if we talk about sort of younger players like Emma Barry, who've been able, Nick McCall at times, and sort of some of the younger Scottish players who've been able to go out to Australia and just get some training experience and spend some time in those environments and see what it's like to play at the pinnacle of the sport. And Geva was an incredible performer, and I think she's probably one of the first international netballers that I remember kind of being a bit taken aback by and thinking, Jesus, this is like intense. Because I've made no secret about the fact I'm quite late to netball, learned about it only about 10 years ago. And I think, actually, if I remember correctly, it was an England versus Australia game. And it was Geva Mentor and Caitlin Bassett, I think, who I spoke to in mixed zones. And I was like, might be out of my depth here. But incredible athletes, like incredible humans. And I'm really excited to see what comes next. You mentioned Netball France. I have no doubt that she'll be in demand from a media perspective. We know netball struggles for a voice, and Geva's been fantastic this year. Like, if we just use the streaming episode that was a joke earlier in the year, it was Geva who sort of put her head above the parapet and said, look, this isn't good enough if this sport wants to be professional. So to have her maybe as a kind of totem on the outside for the sport feels something to me that would be that could be a really useful asset as the sport tries to grow and go forward.
Yeah, I mean, she's going to be gone from the court, but definitely not gone from netball. I feel like
No, she's great. And on the subject of legends, back 39-year-old Casey Kapua out of retirement.
Nuts. This is nuts. This is crazy. Like, she played 60 minutes. Right, Julie Fitzgerald. Casey, I need you. Okay, gets on a plane, comes to SSN. What?
And
Unbelievable.
just drops in like she's been doing it all season.
Yeah, and we should say called in because Jodie Ann Ward ruptured her ACL. Probably Paul just like I think that would have been the last like the deadline before Com Games.
Yeah.
All fingers crossed that it's a really good rehab and everything goes well and etc. etc. It's probably from my experience with athletes with ACL, she's on the cusp.
Yeah,
Anyone
very
after
close.
that is touch and go. But yeah,
It does leave. We're probably getting some international stuff in due course, but it does leave Jamaica, especially with Shamira Sterling Humphrey pregnant, does leave maybe a few question marks as far as Jamaica are concerned. And
in terms of prep, yeah.
yeah, in terms of prep, yeah, that's what I was going to say. In terms of prep and how ready they're going to be for what is going to be a really fierce Commonwealth game.
It's interesting because on that point with Jamaica, because they've made themselves more available sort of in the last year, well, in this last window than they ever have, because they're always quite a difficult team to get to play against. And
Yeah,
I know that Australia and New Zealand are desperate to have a go at them before they get to the majors, because I think that's one of the things they feel like they don't get to prepare. So it is, to your point, it's not from want of trying, but if Jamaica perhaps in the calendar ahead lined up Australia or New Zealand, they are going to look at that and be like, again, we don't have this. This is not the Jamaica, all being well, that we'll face at Com Games, so they won't get the prep that they kind of hoped for again. But look, Latanya Wilson is at the top of the boards in stats in
absolutely.
SSN for everything, giving it all at goalkeeper at the moment for Thunderbirds, keeping them in the top four, which is just, I think she's quietly for me like the best player in the world right now. So a big claim. I'll accept that. That's a big one. If we had a klaxon, it would say big claim. But I just think that's amazing. Like to her, Jodie Ann Ward, Shamira Sterling. This feels like this.
That's a good idea for an episode as well, Chloe. Post Super League and post SSN season, let's rank the top 10 players in the world right now. Whew.
I'm not sure social media will.
Could we carry that way? Or maybe we might need some seriously expert input into it, such an episode. But once put in the bank.
International netball. We've had some of that actually, haven't we, Paul?
We have, yeah. We had some netball. I didn't get a chance to see it, but the Australian Kelpies, I think in the end, as most people expected, too good for England's men's team. I spoke to a couple of people at Copperbox who had travelled specifically to watch that game, which I think is perhaps more than the result is probably the thing I've taken out of it, the growing interest in sort of men's netball. There's obviously that Olympic thing that hangs in the background, whether it's mixed, whether it's men's and women's, whatever it might end up being. So it does feel like a pretty natural course of action that we're going to see more of this. I didn't get to see it at the weekend, partly because I was racing to get my daughter from a Duke of Edinburgh trip and then get us down to the Copperbox to watch Pulse versus Rhinos. Did you watch any of it, Clay?
No, I haven't been able to watch it either. Too busy. But I did see that, I think it's awesome they got to play the Copperbox. They got to play Motor Point. As you said, like men's netball is here to stay, needs to be celebrated, needs to be acknowledged. It's great that I think I like the way they integrated it in with the NSL season, like because so many of these Thorns are part of NSL teams, training partners and whatnot. So they have a lot of support and backing. Anyway, and I was pleased to see the BBC really take on this as well, on this men's piece. So yes, as you said, the Olympic thing, I think that is quite a considerable thing that sort of hangs in the background. But yeah, looks like all English teams, they've still got some distance to the Aussies.
Still a bit of making up to do. It's also a very different sport, isn't it? I think if you've seen any of the clips on social, there's quite a bit of debate about goaltending and different things like that, about how I suppose how high basically some of the guys can jump. But I think something I'm going to try and actively get a little bit more not involved in. I'm not going to play before anyone gets.
Oh my gosh!
No chance. Absolutely no chance. But I am going to try and take a little bit more of an interest in and find out a little bit more and try and take it in, because I do think it's going to be crucial to the growth of the sport. rounding off the news, and I suppose take it all the way back to a little bit of England chat. El Cardwell back on a court, which we haven't seen for a while after a really nasty injury.
Yeah, and a really long rehab. But
Yeah,
we saw her on the Melbourne Mavericks socials, on her own socials, collab post, that she is playing, bibbed up. So maybe, probably back for this season because SSN has just reached its halfway mark. But really cool to see. We had that kind of touched on that conversation with the fitness of some of the shooters in the England environment and why they were called up and whatever. But I think you and I both said a fit Elle Cardwell is just an absolute weapon. So cool to see, and I hope it, fingers crossed, it continues to go well for her, and she can get to court by the end of the season.
and as you said, SSN has sort of ticked just over halfway, and I think for us, as we're obviously focused on Super League, and we get stuck into that in a moment, but I do think it'll give us an opportunity to maybe take a closer look at SSN when sort of Super League finishes off in the next sort of, it'll be 4 or 5 weeks-ish now, grand final at the start of July. So, I think watching how L evolves, watching how New South Wales Swifts make you eat your words, and watching how Latanya Wilson becomes the best netball player in the world. They're all on the menu.
She
Or
is.
sorry, I was trying to quote you, but
Don't misrepresent me completely.
Yeah.
You might have been correct about a certain opinion about the New South Wales Swifts that no one really wants to talk about. But I think the other thing, Paul, that we will come back to, certainly not just about the results, but where the holes are in these SSN teams and which maybe NFL players might fill them. Because, well, contracting periods, Jace beautifully spoke to us about how tricky it is. But I think in SSN land, the conversations will be starting. They'll start looking at their recruitment. Our club's certainly already looking at it. So,
have you had your magnifying glass out, Chloe, looking at squads and where you might be able to put 2 + 2 = 5, but really
I
4?
think so. I think you'd be looking at the Giants, definitely. Definitely a shooter, definitely now already a defender, but with Jodie Ann Ward, what that looks like longer term. Melbourne Mavericks, Tracy Neville's team, definitely needs some mid-court in there, some sort of wing attack. Goal attack, certainly. They've got a bunch of shooters in there. And I think, I don't know, you've got some older guns in there. Romelda Aiken-George, how long is she going to keep playing for? I don't know. I think there are holes. So.
Yeah, I think it's fair. And like you said, Jace pretty much told us that recruitment teams are out and about doing their stuff. So, yeah, very interesting. Let's get to that in due course. Let's not write off this season because segue perfectly to round 12 in the Netball Super League. I think it's probably fair to say as we get to this stage of the season when it comes to reviewing and previewing, and you and I were chatting about this before we hit record, we're maybe going to have a little bit more news and maybe 2 or 3 games that tend to take our focus. And just caveat here, that is not to write any teams off. It's just that's where the interest is going to be. It's natural in any sport. So after the weekend, Thunder are in. They were as good as in anyway. I think mathematically it would have taken what back in the day my producers would call a mathematical miracle for things to be turned around. But Thunder are in, and we now have pretty much a 2-horse race between Nottingham Forest and London Mavericks, which we kind of thought was going to be the case, but it kind of hinged on Forest. Forest went and we'll get into the win over Loughborough in a minute, a second win over Loughborough. Mavericks then went and did their part, and I think it tees up the back end of the season because Mavericks have 2 very tough games remaining, which Mickey was very candid about last week. But effectively, they just need 1 point from those 2 games, which I think throws a whole different kind of light on that bonus point nature that was brought in at the season. It's like, actually, that's going to be very significant. And we thought it might be, but maybe not as significant as it will be here, because actually they could go out and lose 2 games. But as long as they lose one of them by 5, then they're in. They're in the dance and the drought is over.
I think the thing is, in this equation, though, Lightning and Thunder are both teams that are not going to want to cede a point to Mavericks. It's
Correct.
not like,
yes.
Panthers were playing for pride. Lightning and Thunder are playing for positions. So I think the other point mathematically that we can make here kind of is that Pulse look like they've got pole, right? It all but looks locked in. So I think Forest conceding a bonus point to Lightning in the end, which was kind of, when the scoreline blew out and blew back in again, didn't do a Thunder a favour there. But it looks like the shaping of that top four is still up for grabs, which means Lightning and Thunder are not going to want to let Mavericks in. So they are going to hopefully fight the 60 minutes.
And as everyone
just
has
learned that lesson, hasn't she?
and as everybody has told me as well, like the fact that Mavericks are in the box seat at the moment and will potentially be an opponent for Thunder or Lightning in the sort of semi-final round, the first round of the final series. Like you kind of want to make sure you put a marker down. You don't want to give people hope or give them something to hang on to. I think it's fascinating. I think we've said for a while that we need drama to sort of shape our Super League seasons. And I think in this Mavericks Forest battle, we've got it. Now, it might be done this weekend in round 13, but that doesn't lessen the drama, right? That doesn't mean just because a title race finishes a week or 2 weeks early doesn't mean it hasn't been dramatic. And I think we'll start with Forest because I think the way they took apart Lightning for chunks of that game for the second time this season, I think to me is hugely notable. And there's a huge amount to come out. I think I made notes for this game, like after I watched it, and I sent you a running order, Chloe, and there was like about 6 bullet points here. So I'll give it to you first. Like obviously a big win for Forest, a massive win in so many ways. 66-62 at the Motor Point, ostensibly a home game for Lightning, but we know Motor Point is home of Forest. I think that's the big takeaway.
Well, that's certainly what Chelsea was keen to talk about
Yeah.
sort of in the post-match. It's like the Motor Point is Forest's home. But yeah, well, I'm very intrigued on your notes. But I think for me, I did not see a repeat coming, almost in a really similar fashion. But that's exactly, and props to Forest for being able to sort of do that again. But I think for like Rolene, Strucker, Netball's AI, the skill of having a shooter that will take whatever ball is fed, land, and put it in when you're playing a top side that is going to score and score as well, that rewards the work of the defender, is just elite. It is going to help you in these games. And the way she just lands and puts them in, and the speed that puts it, and the accuracy is just such an advantage. And she was on form in that game, really important. Tash Pavlin, great innings from her, certainly to help find that turnover ball to really, push past Lightning. Lightning to me they were bang average. There was Berry Neal probably had a game she would like to park and forget. Sammy Wallace-Joseph as well. That, she was really accurate on the shot, but there was the opportunity to pick the ball off her, which Forest certainly took. I think the thing that's frustrating for Forest fans and for all fans of the game is watching that kind of conundrum with Rhea Dixon and Rolene, and that attacking end. Rhea Dixon is unbelievably astute. Her IQ is crazy. Like, she can move a ball around. She's very clever with her body. She's such a key part of that ball speed that really undid Lightning and undid them both times round. But gosh, she doesn't want to shoot. And there was just a moment on the broadcast where like the camera zoomed in and she just airballed it completely, like not even close, under the post, short. And it was just sort of like, and Chelsea's come to her defence and sort of said she's really important. She does shoot. The stats aren't that bad, but it just feels like when we watch the 10-minute game and then we watch the 5-minute game and you see the pressure on Rolene, just how painful that looks. And obviously, I think Chelsea tried Freya and it just really didn't work. And so it was like, right, well, this game's too important. I just can't do that. I'm just going to go all in with Rolene and get, do a really good solid job in the 10 minutes and hold out. And really Lightning kind of kept up with the super shot. But yeah, I think is that the thing in the end that that Dixon not putting up volume and or being accurate going to be the thing that basically stopped Forest from being a top 4 team? I don't know.
It could come down to that, because really it's out of their hands, right? Like, as we've said, it's basically on Mavericks now to finish the season. I find it fascinating because Ria is a huge part of the way Forest play, the speed they play, the creativity that they play with, the link up with both Rolene and with Bree behind her as well. When Iona plays at centre, that speed that Forest can move the ball through the court, and if you chuck in Pekova, Pavlin, and Leighton at the back end, they're no slouches. They play with real identity and real speed. But the final 5 minutes, like, it was you pointed this out earlier in the season, that the advent of the super shot, which I think has broadly been fairly decent, but it does change the game. Like, it's a completely different game in the final 5 minutes, and I think what you saw towards the end of certainly the third and the fourth quarters was Lightning just deciding, okay, then, like, just let Ria have the ball. Like, wherever she was, it was almost like, well, we're not going to worry about marking Ria. We're going to double up on Rolene, which, to your point, and to Netty Stats, our friend Jean Roberts, who's put up the latest round of numbers, Rolene's phenomenal effort. But it's like that is a problem to solve, because it's very evident. Now, that doesn't mean it can't work. It absolutely can, but it's like, how do you do it? Because I think there were times where it looked to me like Ria may have come close to a hell, and not just Ria. There might have been a hell ball on a couple of occasions. I think it's fair to say, because just everyone else was doing a job in another part of the court. So it's like, okay, how do Forest find a way? Is it too late to kind of find a different way of playing? Because they brought on Freya, and the thinking behind it clearly is that maybe Freya's a more comfortable shot, but then you lose so much of what makes you good through the rest of the court, which is no detriment to Freya, who I think is a more natural shooter than Ria Dixon. And I kind of wonder if at some point there might be a bit of a thought as to whether Ria transitions, a bit like we've seen Susie Liversidge this year, like that incredible netball IQ and that pace of play. Maybe it is better and it's more effective at wing attack, but that's maybe a question for another day. But I thought it was fascinating. That's one side of it. I do think as well, Jada Pekov has got a lot of plaudits, and we chatted a little bit about her when the England squad was named. But I think Tash Pavlin has quietly been a really, really effective goal defence this season, and I thought she had one of her best games at the weekend. And you mentioned Berry had a day to forget. I think it's because Tash was all over her from the start and almost didn't give her a moment to settle. And it was Forest's game. Like I say, it was very much Lightning keeping themselves in it with super shots, and you kind of assumed that the way Lightning have been playing, it was 7 wins in a row. Like, since their Forest defeat, they figured a lot of things out and they looked hugely competent. But I think Forest made them look a little bit ordinary, to be honest, which is to Forest's great credit.
Yeah, kick up the bum was the expression that Vic Burgess used. I think I haven't fleshed this out, and I think I said this to you at the time, but it does feel like to me, when you've got a team that's quick and happy to play the ball around, Lightning structures don't seem to fit so well on that. And I think that was the problem as well, that they were doing what Lightning love to do. They were pressing up, they were dropping back, trying to mark the space, but Forest just seemed happy to just keep playing the ball around. A bit like, to be honest, Dragons as well. Like, possession is fine. That's not where that's not when they lose the ball necessarily when they're passing the ball around to each other. It's normally at the bookends. But yeah, I think that, to your point about Dixon being away attack, I think that's the natural kind of progression, because she is, to me, good enough to be in this league for sure. Like, she's so clever, but it just doesn't feel like, when you have such an obvious shooter, and for me the shooter of the league is Rolene, and to just watch her getting monstered and still shooting, like, that accuracy a couple of times has taken a knock because of that monstering. It didn't in that game. She didn't blink. She kept going. It's kind of painful. It's not that's always one of my things with the super shot. Is like, I call it when it gets all sticky and congested and backwards and forwards, and I'm just like, wow, that's champagne netball, this
Yeah,
is what we.
and that's really fair. That's
And
really
that's
fair.
kind of what that looks like when it's really frustrated like that. So yeah, look, I'd hope it's not I don't want it to be the story for Forest, but I do think it is such a red flag that is the case. So yeah, we'll see how they go. But for Lightning, the other side of it, to that point, I think Shadeen van der Merwe doesn't match up well against Rhea Dixon. Like, and we saw that when Shadeen was in a Thunder dress and Rhea was in a Lightning dress in that Super League final. But there's clearly just every player, I think, has another player that they don't like
Yeah,
playing against.
it's weird, isn't it? The more I've covered netball, that like it, and you can't always work out quite why. Sometimes you can because of speed, physicality, whatever it might be. But sometimes you just can't work out why the matchup is a bit odd.
And I did wonder why Jodie Gibson didn't come on, and
I thought that.
I don't know if it's a fitness thing because she hasn't been fit in the last game as well, or and maybe we've said the expression before, powder dry. I don't know, but that was curious to me. But yeah, I think Lightning was struggling down kind of both ends. Yeah, a bit shaky, but they only seem to be doing it against Forest, really. So
I do wonder as well, like, and to your point about the super shot, like, I don't think we're having this conversation if the super shot's not in play. So I think it's fair to point that out, right? Like, because I think if you have a shooter who's incredible, as Rolling is, and you have a goal attack who's a playmaking goal attack as opposed to a shooter, and crucially, you don't have 20 minutes of a 60-minute game that are completely different to the other 40 minutes, then I don't think you're having this conversation. So, we've spoken about it in terms of squad builds and all that sort of stuff. That I think that's extremely fair to point out that I don't think you're having this conversation if there's no super shot, which in itself is a story.
So yeah, I think we, in terms of post-season, but before, we should be, let's set aside some time to look at each teams and what we would rebuild and how we'd rebuild it.
Yeah, we're building an off-season catalogue here already. We're not even through more than one game of round 12.
So much content.
I suppose alongside that then was Mavericks win. I watched this game Monday morning. Mavericks 69, Panthers 67. An epic on every level. It seesawed both ways. It was just a fantastic netball match, to be honest. It was a bit chaotic at times, which I loved. And in the end, that win is so huge for Mavericks because it means their destiny was always in their own hands, but it's marginally easier now with those 3 points in the bag.
Yeah. It's interesting because the most entertaining netball is not always the best netball.
No, I agree with that. Yeah. Like most sport, to be honest, the messy stuff is quite often like the most fun.
Yeah, I think you have to ask how Panthers fumbled the bag on this
Yeah,
one.
I think that's fair.
Because what was it, 60-65 ahead of final super shot period?
Yes.
With two shooters that can very much super shoot in Panthers end. But yeah, like credit to Mavericks because Raz Quashie, who I thought was being really disruptive. Quiet first quarter, really, hello, I'm here. Second quarter, unbelievable fly, like right at the top, and then ping something in the leg. We saw her on the bike, so maybe not worst case scenario, but terrible timing. Given what's coming, given the personal story, I think Raz spoke about this on socials, but she's been part of Mavericks for so long and she's been waiting for this top 4 moment. So, fingers crossed for her. But that then shifted Izzy Phillips into goal defence. What did you make of that performance?
Yeah, I was trying to recall last year at Pulse. I think we saw her more at centre and wing defence. I think there might have been one occasion where she had a goal defence bib on. I can't quite remember. But I think Izzy's had a really efficient season, and I think it just shows a versatility. She's still so young, so getting that additional exposure there is obviously great for her. But yeah, I do think it's sort of I think Jenna and Raz have been so good together. Like they've built a platform. I think it just disrupted things. We spoke about it with Cardiff. How do you kind of rechange your structure when you have an injury. And I suppose Raz has been so crucial to laying a platform for everything. I as much as I thought Izzy did a good job there, I just thought it kind of just skewered the balance a little bit for what Mavs were kind of doing. But equally, like, I know we've said this every single time, and we spoke to Mickey about it last year, Mavs found the way again. Like, despite these injuries and despite these conundrums that in some ways they are forcing upon themselves, it's very different this year. And maybe it speaks to the culture that's been created behind the scenes that Mavs have faced these kind of situations before, injuries or being a favourite to make a top four, and kind of messed it up, if we're really honest. Some of those squads they've had down the last sort of 7 or 8 years now, it is, since they made it, more than good enough to be a top four team. Whereas this team, they're the polar opposite. They're made of some strong stuff somehow. Like, they are. Yeah, they are. They're really finding a way because they've had injuries, and they've gone to extra time. I think more than any other team in the league, and it's like they are made of stern stuff.
Definitely, maybe the greatest beneficiary of the super shot in the the whole league. I think the other thing I would talk about with this game is Emily Andrew.
Yeah.
She was really like the thorn in Panthers' side. Like she just had that front space and just did really, really well with it. But she doesn't look fit to me. She looks like she's playing. And obviously she came off, and things got really come close, and to the point where I think she came on in the 9th minute of the 4th quarter. She came back on. So I imagine that conversation on the bench was like, we need you. And she said, yeah, sure. But she didn't miss. She was 100% in the 1 point, super accurate like that. There was a shot at the death of quarter 2, like right on the edge going in. I think she was really critical to the outcome of that game. And then also Susie Liversidge, or Leversidge, if you're a certain head coach. Interesting. 43 feeds.
Yeah.
Wow.
Keeps going up every week.
It's crazy. Like, that was some effort, and there were real attempts by Panthers sort of to take Susie out. And look, Panthers did have Mavericks struggling. So, I think we'll probably come to talk about this with the preview, but, if Emily Andrew is kind of making it towards the end of the line, like with however state,
limping
over it, and Raz Koshi, we don't know the state of the injury. Like, that's going to be pretty tough for the game that they've got coming. But yeah, as you said, like, they got it done, and
I think it's worth a little bit of a reflection here on Panthers, because we spoke about them at the top as well. Like, they've had 5 bonus point defeats this season. Not a huge stretch to think at least 3 of those could have been victories. So you add 6 points to their total. That would put Panthers on 20 points, only 5 behind Mavericks and 1 ahead of Forest. And that's not taking into account that they'd be denying those 2 teams a result. So Panthers will be very much in the mix. So I think, given what they've gone through this year, I think that's a really fair point, because if we talk about the importance of bonus points, like 5 bonus points for Panthers this year is almost 2 wins. Like I think that's really kind of important to kind of reflect on. And I think it shows that maybe in the past, where we haven't had bonus points, we might have been able to just look at a team and think, well, they've lost 10 of their 14 games this year. But if Panthers end up losing maybe 10 or 11 of their games this year, but half of them, or maybe more than half of them, are by less than 5 points, it tells me you've got something. I don't quite know what, but it tells me you've got something.
I mean, I think we, at the start of the season, would have looked at that squad and thought, yeah, that's a top 4 challenger. So I think it checks out that they have been pushing. I just think, had things gone a different way, like, if the butterfly effect, that they might be in a different position, and it might be them and not Mavericks that are challenging. But I do think also the other thing really to say is that both teams have an immense amount of character, and clearly character building is an enormous part of netball success. I mean, you could say that across sport, but I genuinely think now Mavericks just are so comfortable and the uncomfortable because they've just come out on it and the right side of it so many times. It's just such a powerful thing in sport, whatever, to just be in that position and just go, it's all right, we got this. Panthers have just been on the other end of that. And yeah, I thought it was interesting as well. We got 60 minutes out of Gabby Sinclair for the first
Yep.
time. And for Izzy Phillips's sort of goal defence big debut, like, God,
Deal
blimey.
with Gabby, yeah.
Yeah, and I think when Gabby has freedom, she's just, you see the caliber of player that she really is.
She's a great player to watch when she's
Such
fit
a great
and
player
well
to watch.
rested.
Having talked about, some of the most entertaining netball is not always the best looking netball, but she is still a great player to watch and to enjoy. And I personally really enjoyed watching her play. Yeah, and Ruth Hughes and Withington getting a run around in the mid-court, like that's not the mid-court that Panthers would have necessarily expected, and I think, it's just a tough one. But Mavericks got the job done. They came from 9 down to be up by like 5.
There's so much to be
I don't
said
know.
for that. Like you've probably done it same as me, Chloe, but when you speak to a team or players who are just never know when they're beaten, like that it becomes a superpower in sport because like you're never out of any situation, and you can, if you're a coach, you can just literally point to it at any point and say, look, this is what we've done. Like, believe in yourselves, go out there and do it again. So it does make Mavericks an interesting proposition down the stretch now, and hopefully everyone stays fit. We'll chat about that when we get to the preview. The other game of significance, at least at the weekend, was Thunder's win over Dragons. 59-54. Dragons nicking a bonus point, which I don't think many people had them down as taking. More minutes for Paige Reed, which I think is probably the biggest kind of on-court eventuality. But I think for Thunder, who've been dealing with their injuries all year, they're in, which is always what they wanted to do. Make sure you get the points in the bag, be in the tournament at the end of the season, and they're there.
Yeah, I think that's the big takeaway from the game, because it wasn't a particularly pretty game. It got a bit WWE, I think, to quote Kat Vitae in another tweet from a while ago. Yeah, it was very, very physical, I think. I'm sure it was probably more physical in person. But yeah, some changes from Karen Gregg that maybe on the surface were a bit odd. Like, to me, Nicola Smith maybe coming off was a curious one. But then Ellie McCormick comes on and is sort of everywhere and anywhere, and I just think Dragons now are just tough. Like, they are just going to be that. When you consider the first time these two met to the second time. But yeah, I think the big thing, as you said, and I think Karen told us as much, right, as our first guest on this here podcast, is like, let's just get to the top 4. Like, that's the target. And yeah, Paige Reed getting more minutes. She's still really finding her feet and trying to understand the setup and the play. And I think that is, Mickey actually said it as well. Like, it is harder than it looks, and there's still a bit of time. But, we have pointed out that Thunder have big game still with Mavericks. So, yeah, probably also a little bit disappointed that Forest didn't do them a favour with the bonus point as well.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because I think given sort of Thunder obviously have two, they've got Pulse left to play and Mavericks left to play. So it's two of the trickier games that you would kind of have on your roster or on your schedule kind of coming in. So they would have looked at the kind of table and thought, can we be done a favour? But, Lightning nicked the point. And in the end, I think Thunder were good value for their win. But like you say, it didn't quite flow. But I think that's fine. I think we've said it on a few times. We've said it about Pulse on a number of occasions this year. Like, at the end of the day, sport is about winning. And we can sit here and say that, oh, yeah, we'd love to play the best netball in the world and cruise through things. And, Pulse were brilliant for the first half of the year, but have found a way through the second half of the season. The polar opposite for Lightning, but then Lightning have just come completely unstuck, and Thunder have just been finding a way all year. And I think perhaps a bit of volatility in Thunder's performances was to be expected with their injuries, but they are now almost fully fit, and they kind of have most of their options back. Not their real big hitters, obviously. Like, we obviously know there's doesn't look like there's going to be any Lois Pearson. I don't think that's official, but it doesn't look like we're going to see her unless there's a very big surprise. And your face tells me you might have some information on that front.
No, I mean, we were told that she might come back, so
Yeah, but I think it's really tough when you see that like Paige is trying to reintegrate herself back into the team, and Lois is a fabulous player. It would be really hard. Like, of course you would want it as an option. Why wouldn't you? Like, she's brilliant. But I just think, maybe I'm talking too much. That's what
no. Well, I think just from social media as well, we see there was it looked like a barbecue, a very wet braai.
Yes, yeah.
Lois was there, so she's obviously been in and around the team environment still, which I think is half the puzzle piece in terms of fitting back in with your team as well. So she played with Alma Ray last season. Paige played with Paige Reed, knows Emma Rayner incredibly well.
Yeah.
So it's, who knows, maybe manage minutes if she does come on, and etc. But as we've said on this podcast a couple of times, like top 4 is kind of a whole other competition.
Yeah.
So
It's
let's see.
much,
she may not. She may.
It's very much a case of getting in the mix, isn't it? And I will do this in the semi-final, in the final part, but I was going to kind of just sort of tee up what the final series effectively would look like, because I kind of think that's kind of important because of the way things have changed a little bit this year. But before we get to that, just very quickly, Pulse 73, Rhinos 50. Sam Bird said to me afterwards that was more like it. And I think that was really fair to say. The most notable thing here was the first change to the Pulse starting lineup all season. In my opinion, a little bit overdue, because I think much of what Pulse have done well over the first sort of 6 or 7 weeks of the season was based on a real consistency of performance. But then also that gives, as you pointed out on a few occasions, coaches all over the league, it's like, oh, okay, that's what you're doing. We'll make sure we can work out and stop that. And I think right from the off here, it seemed to me that Sophie Kelly was almost a target for shooting early on. And she put up a good volume of shots in the first quarter. And I think that just disorientated Rhinos a little bit, who obviously would naturally assume that Liv was going to put up the larger part of the volume. And Sophie Kelly was on point right off the bat from super shot zone. She's a natural long-range shooter anyway. She's comfortable from distance. And it allowed Pulse to settle into a pretty dominant rhythm early. Alicia Scholes was back in form, sort of took out Cassie Howard a little bit. Those aren't my words. Those are the words of Cassie Howard herself, as you'll hear. Most listeners to the podcast will know we're big fans of Cassie, so it was great to speak to her. And equally, she's apparently a big fan of the podcast. So shout out to Cassie. Thank you very much. We'll hear from her in a second. But a better second half, it must be said, from Rhinos. They won the third quarter, and it prompted Sam to take a tactical timeout and just give everyone a bit of a G up, and Pulse finished strongly. But I think they'll take a lot from that, because there hadn't really been the attacking fluidity of the early weeks of the season for a reasonable amount of time, I think it's fair to say. But they were a much more fluid attacking unit.
So
tougher tests await, though, I think it's fair to say.
How much of that sort of third quarter because Nicole Britt came on?
I wouldn't put it down to one. There were a lot of changes. I think there were there were a bunch of changes across the team, and I think they lost a little bit of rhythm. The lead was early on in the third quarter up to 23, I think, at one point. And I think when you start to then make changes, and this is true of every team in the league, you lose that little bit of the rhythm, you lose that little bit of structure. And I think for the third quarter, it was just everything tightened up a little bit. And I think they won the fourth quarter by 9, I think, in the end. So, yeah, I wouldn't put it down to just one player in particular. I think it was just kind of a very big lead and a lot of change around the court.
Because I think her numbers just struck out to me.
Yeah, that's fair.
But anyway, please forgive me, Cassie Howard, if you are listening, but I will say that I thought this was not a performance of a team that's in round 10 of a league from Rhinos. Like, I was a bit disappointed, actually, that they didn't really put up a bit more of a challenge. and we'll hear from Cassie a little bit about Pulse's work on her, which I think is key. But they were just walking into traps. They were slow, error-ridden. I kind of forgot Harriet Jones existed in the first quarter. Like, Joyce was kind of really pulling everybody, like, come on, I'll do this. It just really disjointed. I don't know, I just wanted more from Rhinos, and it just really wasn't there. And I think, Cassie, it was probably a bad day in the office for everybody in that team, and Pulse have a point to prove, don't they? Like we talked about, Sam's reaction is perfect, isn't it? Like it does sum that up. Like, that's a bit more like it, bit fighty, isn't it? Like, let's go. But it just seemed to me like Pulse. Zara Everett had a cleaner game, a really effective game. Which was cool to see, because I think the penalty count was something I've called Pulse out for. So to see that sort of adjustment coming was really good. And I think the Sophie Kelly point that you made just kind of like makes the Rolene point as well. Like, when you have a shooter shooting from range from like the first minute, the opposition team like, oh, you guys going to be big, isn't it? And I think that because actually Pulse made quite a few errors early on in that first quarter, but they got away with it, and then they got their stride, and then off we go. So
I think it's a fair point on Rhinos. I think we've said it, and Lauren said it to us herself, and that was early on in the season. They make their own mistakes a lot. They don't make life easy for themselves, and like, as I say, they were significantly behind after the first quarter, and it got out to 23 like early in the third, like that.
They were felt like they were in a quagmire. Like, no, there was one lead to the ball. It was just like, oh, come on, come on. Anyway, should we hear from Cassie?
Yes, let's hear from Cassie. Cassie, a tough one to take today.
Yeah.
Slow start.
Yeah, I think it was just a rough start for us. And that's something that we really want to work on, because last week as well, it wasn't a consistent start, and then we come out firing, but it's just how we can harness that energy earlier on in the game and get the start that we want, so then we can push on instead of having to chase the whole game.
Because that second half, there was a lot of positives to take from that, and
Yeah,
it feels
definitely.
like it's been a bit like that all season.
Yeah.
Fits and starts.
I think it's just consistency for us. There is some really lovely passages of play that we've had throughout all the games across the season, defensively and in the attack as well, but it's just keeping that consistent, recognising what they're doing early. And I think in defence we switched the kind of structures up a bit, and that felt a bit more productive towards the second half. But it's just like how we can recognise that earlier, because obviously we're doing our homework on them, but it's just switching that up during the quarters instead of at half time.
Well, we spoke to Lauren Palmer earlier this season, and obviously kind of a little bit of a tough start coming in late.
Yeah.
How have you found working with Lauren? What she brought to the table this year?
Lauren's been absolutely amazing, and obviously I've worked with Liana the whole time, so it was just exciting to have Lauren come in and bring something new. I think tactically and technically she's really on it, and she just knows her stuff around the different structures that other teams have for us. She's really believed in me personally, and this is my first time kind of fully playing wing defence in the Super League, because last year I mainly played centre, so her and Maggie have both really helped me kind of grow into the position and feel confident to just fly on ball and play my own game, which I really appreciate.
I was going to ask you a little bit about that this year, because last year was sort of your breakthrough year, but it feels like this year you've cemented a real place in the team. Is wing defence your favourite? Or
It's a funny one. I love centre, I love wing defence. I think wing defence gives me that element where I'm just kind of free to go on ball, and I love intercepting. Who doesn't love intercepting the ball? And you just get a big kind of confidence lift when that happens throughout the whole team. But I do also love the feeding side of things, so I think it's just about what works best for the team and just keeping both those positions ticking over.
And a big week for you, called up to the England
really
squad.
happy.
How was that?
Yeah, it's great news. I mean, it's been so busy for me because I've been in my exam week, because I'm in my last year of uni, so the phone's been blowing up, and also I'm just trying to get my exams done at the same time. So yeah, it's been great, and it's an absolute honour. Futures is such an exciting group of girls to be among, and Sophie's going to be in there, and I know some, like, it's funny playing against players in the league and then joining them in the Futures camp, so I'm excited, really looking
And how
forward
much,
to
like,
that.
coming back here, because I've read previously, obviously you've had family who kind of live in the London area, and you came through the Pulse system, you've won trophies with Pulse, so how big a game is this for you as well?
Yeah, it's always a big one. I love, like, I know the style that Pulse are going to bring, and I love to kind of have that battle on court because you always know it's going to be a big game. The crowd here are great as well, so it is exciting coming back and just giving everything when you play against them and kind of seeing what you can do.
And then a final thing, the match up against Alicia Scholes, two of the kind of quicker players in the league is how I would say it. How did you find that after sort of 60 minutes?
Yeah, it's always a feisty one with me and Liz, but I think what they did that was effective in the first half was they screened me, and they had their goal attack come and pick me up to screen me, so I couldn't go on Liz. And it's how we could stop that, so I could kind of be more man-on-man with Liz, and I think we switched that up going into the second half, and I felt like I was more effective there, could do more of a job and kind of like turn over balls. So it was just looking, like, I know the style that Liz plays, and it's just how as a unit we can work to adapt to basically use all our strengths against the whole Pulse
And
setup.
final question, just a couple of games to go, and obviously just determined to finish on as high a note as you guys can.
Yeah, exactly. I think we have had some amazing kind of parts to our game, and it's just having fun. I love the group. Like, it's a really amazing group of girls. Everyone's got so many different strengths to bring, and it's just like going into the games and kind of being happy with what we put out there, being confident to let ball go, and kind of being proud of what we put on court, and that's what we really want, because I think in the second half we were proud of that, but it's just starting the way that we know we can. And when we started kind of right at the start of the season, it was just this attitude of we'll go and give it everything, and it's harnessing that for the next few games that come up that we really want to work on and just show the teams what we're made of towards the end of the season.
Listen, thanks for your time.
Thank you
Safe
so
travels
much.
back. I know you've got a long
Thank
journey, and good luck for the rest of the season.
So Cassie, another fan of the show, and the Howard family. So great to hear.
Hello, Howards.
I think at this point we would usually kind of have a chat with our guest. We haven't got a guest, but we have got an Unlocked coming, haven't we, Chloe?
We do. I'm excited for this
One of our favourites.
And that's all the tease that they're going to get, isn't it?
Are we going to say who it is?
No.
No.
Keep that a secret.
You'll have to tune into your feeds later on this week. I'd tell you it's Chloe who's not. Moving swiftly on. Again, we'll kind of go through this pretty quickly because we've kind of summed up the permutations part of the league. But I think the biggest game of the weekend is clearly Mavericks, because it's up to Mavericks. They are on the road on Friday night at the David Wallace Arena. They play Loughborough Lightning, as we've said now. And as much as Mavs nicking the point they need from two games, it's also worth suggesting, given that Thunder play Pulse and then Mavericks, if Mavericks could win both of those games, they could nick third place off Manchester Thunder, which I think is sneaky under the radar. But, they just need 1 point. I think that's the way they'll be looking at it.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is the game that they're going to get their 1 point. Given what we talked about, if Raz Quashie is not fit, then I just don't think it happens, because when you look at the matchup that then leaves, which is Gemma Donahue on Samantha Wallace-Joseph, and then Izzy Phillips on Berry, I personally think that's fine, but I don't think Gemma Donahue on Samantha Wallace-Joseph is going to be pretty. And I think a kick up the bum has come, so Lightning are going to want to iron that out straight. So I may eat these words, as I have done, because I think there's still, as we said, some absolute characters in a Lightning that if they can find the post, the goalers can shoot. If Susie Liversidge can get in and give that ball, it's going to look good. But, if you're Loughborough Lightning, that's exactly where you're going to work to undo it. So, yeah, meaty. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think the Sammy Wallace-Joseph part of this is the huge part. If Raz isn't fit, then you really fear for what Mavs will be able to do. So I suppose if you're Camilla, your decision and your theory here is how fit is Raz? How fit might Emily Andrew at the other end be as well? Because a game against Alice Harvey is not a cakewalk. It's a physical battle. Do you maybe? I'm not going to say write off because nobody's going to write it off. And a last game of the season at home against Thunder is a tough game to still try and get 1 or 3 points out of. But do you give yourself a better chance if you've got everyone fully fit with maybe a couple of weeks rest? If the injuries are, worst case scenarios, or not worst case scenarios, but you're not in a good place because. And this is not easy because you're either facing a situation where you might just have 1 game left of the season if you lose your spot, or you've got potentially 3 more games down the stretch if you wanted to go all the way to the grand final, right? You have to 2 games down the stretch, or potentially 3 if you nick third or whatever. But.
Yeah, it's tough. I think it's tough, and you're right. Like, what do you do as a coaching staff? And maybe we're giving too much credit to Lightning as well. Like, they could have another bad day, or they have vulnerabilities. We know that they do. So Mavericks are tactically very smart. They're an astute side. They've got a lot of brains behind them. So, Mickey kind of alluded to some of the work that they do as well at halftime, which I thought was a really super interesting nugget from your chat with her, was about the tactics and stuff. The halftime talk and how they work that. But I just think it's too tall a task with such accuracy coming from Samantha Wallace-Joseph, as well as just being a big physical presence.
Their decision might be made for them as well. I think this is quite important to point out as well. Forest play on Thursday night this week, which I think is a little bit of an outlier. Must be something to do with the motor point. I haven't looked into if the motor point's been used for anything at the weekend. But Forest play Panthers at home on Thursday night. We know Forest are a formidable outfit at the motor point. You would probably expect them to take all 3 points from that game, which then just kind of cranks up the pressure a little bit more, because it then, it puts them 3 points behind with a better goal difference. And then it almost becomes like, do we have to get this job done? Just get it done. But then equally, if Forest go out and lose on Thursday night, then actually, do you think, do you know what? Maybe we rest them.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because to sort of turn to Forest Panthers, like the way that game went in the first meeting, was wild. Like Joe Tripp calls the timeout like so soon into the first quarter because Panthers are just absolutely all over the place, and then like Panthers end up winning. So
that's another matchup one, right? It's another matchup one.
Potentially, yeah. Like and Forest, such a big win over Lightning, and it's such an important, like in terms of the gravity of it. Not, the margin in the end didn't end up being that big, obviously, but like that's just the Panthers are they're the bonus point team. So banana skin territory there as well. Because actually that. With Sigi Burger out, you've got 2 shooters that know they've got to play. So there's a comfort in that. I think any player would admit that. You're like, if you have a nightmare, it's a bit tough, but no one is really going to come on. Like, it's yours, really. So your bib. And, Tash Pavlin will get the measure of, Gabby Sinclair, full 60 minutes potentially. So, that's going to be another, like, just as Izzy Phillips found out, like, it's quite tough. So, we'll see. But I don't know. I just think the odds are not in Mavericks' favour for this one. So, but we'd love everybody to be fit, obviously, wouldn't we? Like, that's just...
Make for an interesting weekend, though. Thursday netball, Friday netball, Saturday netball, Sunday netball.
First time, isn't it?
Yeah. one game every night.
No dub screen this week.
No dub screen. Just ease your way through the weekend with a bit of netball in the evening every evening.
Pepper your day with netball. Pepper your week.
Okay, Forest Panthers, Lightning Mavericks,
Thunder
Pulse. there's a lot going on here, I think, potentially.
This was the round that was really good last time, wasn't it? Oh, what a game.
So Pulse obviously won the first game,
By 5.
61-56, and barely shot a super shot, if I remember correctly, as well. Like, won that game by being a stronger team. How do we see both of these teams looking at this game? Because I feel like we're almost certain maybe to see them in the postseason, to coin an American phrase, at some point, whether it's a grand final or a prelim final or whatever it might be. On that basis, actually, let me quickly run through what that's going to look like this year, because I think it's a fair conversation to have. That we know that the top 4 is going to be the top 4. There'll be 2 semi-finals: a major semi-final, which is first place against second place, and it'll be the team who finish first, so top of the table, who have home court advantage. The minor semi-final is third place against fourth place, with the third place team having home advantage. The winners of the major semi-final will advance to the grand final. The losers will play the winners of the minor semi-final in what is being called a preliminary final. I don't like that title, but that's what it's called. And it will be the loser of the major semi-final who has home advantage. So just for fun, because this is how we look at the moment, that would give us a major semi-final of London Pulse versus Loughborough Lightning at the Copper Box. Those two have met, I think, every postseason for the last 3 years. Winner of Pulse Lightning would go through to the grand final at the Copper Box. The loser would then play the winner of Thunder versus Mavericks as it stands now. All make sense?
Yeah. I think you said the grand final at the Copper Box, but that's the only thing.
Oh, the O2 I meant to say, sorry. It's a big selling point for this year. So I suppose that's what makes Thunder Pulse maybe an interesting game, because the two could kind of come head to head at any point in that period.
I think Thunder will fancy their chances though against Pulse, because I think they felt they lost it rather than Pulse won it. That they were just uncharacteristically throwing stuff away. But we talk about matchups. I think this is one that has some good history, good meat behind it as well. Certainly in the last couple of years as well. Like we talk about Pulse Lightning, but Pulse Thunder has also been pretty spicy. Yeah. Listen, like the Sophie Kelly, if it's a start, got Nicola Smith Arms. That's a prospect, because Nick Smith really was kind of coming into it the first time these two teams played, right? So she's got more minutes under her belt. She's really established that partnership with Josie Huckle. The big question is what that Thunder front end looks like. I don't know. I feel like I've said that all season, but is Anya Williams in the mix still? I don't know at this point. She's obviously been struggling with, I think, like concussion.
But what didn't sound very nice. I think it was put on social media that she's kind of been battling a bit of sort of an illness related to concussion. I might have that really wrong.
Yeah, no, I think that's about right. Like, as in, I think she's been sort of in Next Gen struggling, and then obviously Shannon Malik has been doing a job, but coming on and off, and then Paige Reed is in there. So I think it's going to be a tough call for Karen Gregg about how she plays the game and plays her players in this, given that obviously they will want to win, and how that all rotates together, because you can't really. I think it's games like that where, like, subs, there's suddenly so much pressure on making the right call at the right time. And obviously, Pulse have had a great game. They'll want to take that momentum forwards. They've got to go up to Manny to do it, so it's going to be hostile. Home of obviously Liz Scholes as well. So yeah, I don't know. What do you reckon? What do you think?
I think it's a cracking game. I also think, you know me, I like to make a story out of a league table, but a Thunder win here puts Thunder on 31 points. If Pulse nick a bonus point in defeat, it would put them on 32. If they don't nick a bonus point in defeat, it leaves them on 31. If Lightning beat Mavericks, it puts Lightning on 32, which has 3 teams all still in with a chance of getting home court advantage for the major semi-final, which, if nothing else in netball, I know will be doing producers, floor managers, and logistical engineers an absolute nightmare, because they could be in any one of 3 places: London, Loughborough, or Manchester.
But I also wonder, if you're Thunder, do you want that week off to rest your players, to get maybe give your injured players another week of, or do you want the exposure to figure it all out? Yeah. I think you probably want to be the major final winner. I'm sure that's what you want, but actually I think to quote myself, or to refer back to myself, said that this Thunder side, if these players come back in, these teams could be playing a different team every time, different iteration of this combat. So it's an interesting one for them. But I think it's really important. Your stories out of a league table, which is almost its own sort of, is important to make, because it still tells us that actually Thunder is not. It's not third, or they can still climb back up. So yeah, crikey. It's hard to think that we've still got, Rhinos and Dragons in the background of all of this.
But again, sneaky, quite important, this game, right? Because no one will want to finish bottom. Dragons, shown by taking a bonus point off Thunder, that they can be in every game they play this year. They finish at home against Pulse. And who knows, Pulse might have even wrapped up top spot by then. And then what do you decide to do? Do you decide to rest? Do you play some combinations? Whatever it might be. So a win for Dragons against Rhinos means that you've potentially got a chance for Dragons to not finish bottom of the table. So it's I think there's pride in it for these two, who I think have had very different seasons. I think Dragons have overcome a really horrendous injury and have largely been competitive, but probably just found a little bit wanting as an attacking unit. Yeah, as an attacking unit is what I was going to say. Whereas Rhinos, as you've made the point really well, we're 11 rounds in and we don't quite know what Rhinos are yet, really. And I feel like if it comes down to just a simple question of what sort of team have you got, I kind of think I'd back Dragons in this instance.
I agree. On form, I think they're if you're graphing it, they're sort of trending up, and Rhinos sort of trending down. So yeah, I think I think Dragons do make less errors. I think they have figured out their super shot strategy now, whatever it is. I think they've nailed it. I think they've been forced to think earlier on about the things they're weaker at, whereas Rhinos, it never feels like they've quite addressed their weak spots in the same way.
That's a really good way to put it. Yeah.
I think. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think Dragons will probably. I think I would back them.
Okay, that's round 12 previewed, round 11 reviewed. Round 12 reviewed, round 13 previewed. We are getting towards the end, Chloe, of this season. I was going to ask you to make some predictions, but I don't think that's worthwhile. I think we'll probably just call it a day here.
Too soon. It's too soon. Well, maybe it's exactly the right moment to really put me on the spot and ask for the predictions. But
yeah,
I think what we can say is this is a big week of Super League netball. So
we may return next week with first, second, third, and fourth all up for grabs, or first, second, third, and fourth all locked in, which I think is great. It talks about the jeopardy of what we want at this stage of the season. And yeah, I think a good weekend, and we can enjoy each game on its own merit each day. That's the biggest discovery of the weekend. But look, as always, thank you for listening. If you get an opportunity to drop us a review or rate us, I think the reviews would be really helpful. They just help us from an algorithm point of view. Chloe and I will do some planning as well, because we're going to have to think about how the off season looks for us. We're going to have to look that way, not just Super League teams preparing for the off season.
Final day, Paul. That's how we're going to do that.
Yes, so grand final day that's a really good point. And how do we do it? We've batted around the idea of a kind of instant live hit type of effort. Accreditation is out as well. I've noticed as well, so need to fill our forms in.
Will they give us a little side room in Wembley where we can go live all day? Well, maybe not live all day, but we.
What are you doing at Wembley, Chloe?
Oh, is it Wembley? Is it? Oh, it's the O2.
You corrected me the last time.
Time to go to bed.
Yeah, it's time to go to bed. So yeah, we'll have a bit of a think about how the off season looks, how grand final day looks. But as ever, stick with us, listen to us, enjoy the podcast, and we'll speak to you soon.